Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House, here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Deputy Speaker.
Honorable members, I have received communication from Ms. Nicole Oliveri, MP, Member for Laborie, who has requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the member seeks is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I have the honor to lay the administrative report and interim financial statement of the National Investment Fund Holding Company Limited as at December 31st, 2018. I beg to move that paper 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that paper 1 will be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister of Education.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to lay the administrative report of the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago for the fiscal year 2016 to 2017. Thank you.
Leader of the House.
Very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to lay paper number 3, the response of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to the 25th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination into the development program for fiscal year 2018-2019 and follow-up on the ministerial response to the 6th report of the Tobago House of Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Member for Mayaro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to present the 10th report of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure on an inquiry into flood alleviation and control measures for major river basins and drainage catchments in Trinidad and Tobago subjected to major flooding over the past years.
Member for Caroni Central.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to present the following reports. The 29th report of the Public Accounts Committee on an examination of the audited financial statements of the National Library and Information System of Trinidad and Tobago, NALIS, for the financial years 2009 to 2011, and the authority's expenditure and internal controls for the years 2009 to 2018. And also the 30th report of the Public Accounts Committee on an examination of the concerns raised in the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2016, 2017, 2018, with specific reference to the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and follow-up on the implementation of the recommendations in the 4th, 14th, and 20th reports of the Public Accounts Committee.
Member for Aruka Maloney.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to present The third interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the National Statistical Institute of Trinidad and Tobago Bill 2018, 5th session, 2019-2020, 11th Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I have the honor to present the 17th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity on an inquiry into persons living in poverty and extreme poverty in Trinidad and Tobago, with specific focus on vulnerable groups.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to present the third interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Cannabis Control Bill 2019 in the 5th session, 11th Parliament.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To the Minister of Education, could the Minister outline what health and safety measures have been implemented to protect students and staff at schools when using the chemical HDQ neutral being distributed by the Ministry of Education, as reported in the press today?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As part of the procurement process, the Ministry of Education consulted with our Health, Safety and Environmental team, who assured that all chemical products, by reviewing the material safety data, the safety data sheet, and any other supporting documents that are provided by the suppliers. These documents were verified to ensure that the information provided is accurate. HDQ neutral is on the list of disinfectants that meets the Environmental Protection Agency criteria. The Ministry of Education, out of an abundance of caution, has halted the use and the distribution after consultation with the Ministry of Health and other providers. In the future, Ministry of Education will ensure that all chemicals to be used and distributed will be accompanied by the appropriate material safety data, the material safety data sheet. Thank you.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Minister, in these circumstances, could you inform the House what was the value of the contract in the use of this material that was used in the disinfecting of schools?
Minister of Education.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't understand the question, and even if I understood the question, that question doesn't apply.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Minister of Education, could you assure all stakeholders as it relates to the conduct of CAPE, CSEC, and the SCA examination that the use of chemicals or cleaning agents and so on will not affect the conduct of these examinations when students go into the respective classrooms to write these exams, which are dawning upon us in July and August of 2020?
Minister of Education.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can assure this Honourable House that the Ministry of Education will be vigilant at ensuring that any cleaning material that is used in an effort to sanitize our school is or meets the required standards, the required health standards. I can give you that assurance.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To the Minister of Works and Transport, given unconfirmed reports that the Galleon's Passage vessel is currently sailing in an unseaworthy condition due to malfunction in bow door, could the Minister assure this House that he is giving this matter his urgent attention?
Leader of the House.
Kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's absolutely no truth to this statement.
Supplemental member for Couva North.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Minister, can you also confirm that the Spirit is currently not sailing due to strike action by port workers?
I will not entertain that question. At the time, it's not the subject matter.
Questions on notice. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister.
Member for Couva South, the remark reached my ear. Retract, please. The last remark. No, do it properly, please. The last remark reached my ear.
Yeah, you said Couva South, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's Couva North.
Pardon?
You said Couva South. It's Couva North.
Oh, okay. Couva North. Let's retract the last statement, please.
I retract, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Laventille West, please. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, having regard to the third interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the National Statistical Institute of Trinidad and Tobago Bill 2018, I beg to move that the committee be allowed an extension of 2 months in order to complete its work and submit a final report by August 31st, 2020.
Honorable members, the question is, be it resolved that the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the National Statistical Institute of Trinidad and Tobago Bill 2018 be allowed an extension of 2 months in order to complete its works and submit a final report by August 31st, 2020. All in favor say aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, having regard to the third interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Cannabis Control Bill 2019, I beg to move that the committee be allowed an extension of 2 months in order to complete its work and submit a final report by August 31st, 2020. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is, be it resolved that the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Cannabis Control Bill 2019 be allowed an extension of 2 months in order to complete its work and submit a final report by 31st August 2020. All in favor say aye. All in favor say aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it.
Public business, private members' business, motions.
I call any member for Oropuch East, and just a reminder, you have 30 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much for the opportunity to raise a matter in the House today. A motion standing on my name, and Mr. Deputy Speaker, the following motion in my name, and may I be permitted to read it. Whereas, pursuant to Standing Order 17, the member for Oropuch East, the member, sought leave on April 27, 2020 to move the adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance, and whereas the matter sought to be raised concern an alleged sale of fuel to Venezuela involving Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, allegedly in contravention of international sanctions. And whereas the Speaker, in ruling that the matter did not qualify under Standing Order 17, failed to declare a possible conflict of interest, and whereas on May 8, 2020, in the aftermath of this ruling, the Speaker, under announcements, rebuked and condemned the member in the House for reporting elsewhere on this matter, and whereas the Speaker committed a breach of the established rules of conduct and conventions of this House, and whereas the Speaker brought the high and noble office of the Speaker into disrepute, be it resolved that this House censures the Speaker for her failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office. Mr. Deputy Speaker, bringing a motion like this brings no pleasure to myself or indeed any member of the opposition. May I begin by indicating that it is a motion of censure. It is a substantive motion on the conduct, integrity, and character of a member of this House, albeit the presiding officer, the Honorable Speaker. This is not a matter that the members of the opposition, including myself, take personal. It has absolutely nothing to do with the person and the personality of that person occupying the chair of Speaker. This matter reflects on the role of the Speaker in promoting democratic principles, constitutional values, and the rule of law. It is not a matter that deals with a personality, and therefore I begin by saying it is not a matter that we are addressing from the point of view of personality, of gossip, of movelang. It is a matter that we want to deal with squarely on the basis of facts, and therefore there are some facts that cannot be in dispute that I would like to put on the table. Mr. Deputy Speaker, by way of introduction as well, this position called Speaker is a very interesting position, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Few people will know that the first Speaker to have that title was indeed Sir Thomas Hungerford in the British Parliament in 1577. He was the first in a line of identifiable speakers. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, for many years it bothered some of us that why do you call the person the Speaker if that person will not speak? And therefore, in our research, we discovered, which is a matter that some people may find interesting, that the person and the office was called the Speaker because that was the person who had to speak to the monarch. And that was the person who had to convey to the monarch that the legislators, persons like ourselves, were in defiance of the monarchy, were making laws and rules in defiance of the monarchy. And therefore, the Speaker, from the origin of that office, was a person who stood there to defend the rights, the freedom of expression, to defend the democracy, and indeed to protect members of the House of Commons. So that is a very interesting point. In fact, the term used in the ancient time was procurator, meaning the agent of the court, the agent of the parliament. And therefore the Speaker, in fact, the Speaker was a very dangerous job. Some persons would resist that appointment. In fact, in the old traditions, they had to drag the person who took the office, they had to drag the person to the seat because the person resisted, because given the checkered history of the speakership, there are sometimes when speakers died violent deaths by way of execution, imprisonment, impeachment, or even expelled. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that does not hold today, albeit to remind the national community that in 1994, a speaker was placed under house arrest by a PNM government in this country. But we don't have those challenges today, but it was a dangerous occupation. And I say this to remind you that the role of the Speaker is to defend the rights of members. Mr. Deputy Speaker, according to, let me serve notice one time. In the limited time available to me, I am treating this as a 2020 and not a test match. So there will be no long run-up and no extensive quotations and so on, because I want to plow through quickly some material. May's parliamentary practice, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the 24th edition on page 220, had this to say about the Speaker. The chief characteristics attaching to the office of Speaker in the House of Representatives are authority and impartiality in the House of Commons. Authority and impartiality. As the symbol of the powers and privileges of the House, the royal mace is borne before him when entering and leaving the chamber. There can be no reflection upon the character or actions of the Speaker, except, of course, as we know, by a substantive motion. Confidence in the impartiality of the Speaker is an indispensable condition for the successful working of procedure, and many conventions exist which have as their object not only to ensure the impartiality of the Speaker, but also to ensure that this impartiality is generally recognized. The Speaker takes part in no debate in either House, or in either the House or in any committee. The Speaker belongs to no party. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thought I would make those points to start. Because you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is well accepted that the Speaker is not an intervener in politics. The Speaker is there as an umpire. The Speaker is not an umpire who came with the home team. The ICC incidentally outlawed that a long time ago. So the Speaker is impartial and must therefore exercise that office with a higher standard than even ordinary members. There's a higher standard of conduct than even ordinary members in the exercise of those duties. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, whatever might be said about Madam Speaker, I will leave other members to reflect on other things, but I have a motion before me which I want to address, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was on April 27th, I brought a motion to this House under Standing Order 17 seeking leave to move a motion that involved a raging international scandal. In fact, my duty on that day was to table a motion so that we can confront what was a raging scandal which has now gone out of control. Every night, some people monitor the Department of the Treasury in the United States to see who sanctioned in, which ship, which captain, which assets are now blocked, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So I brought that with the objective of giving the government an opportunity to speak, to affirm, to deny, to explain. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when that motion was brought to the Speaker on April 27th, it was already in the public domain. We had a news report from Reuters, April 26. Venezuela receives gasoline imports from shipping magnate amid fuel shortage. And I just read quickly from a Reuters report of the 26th. The Aldan, which is the ship, loaded last week in neighboring Trinidad and Tobago. The refinery data showed it has not transmitted a signal with its location since April 22nd, according to the data. The NASDAQ had an article, April 22nd, 26. Venezuela received gasoline imports from shipping magnate amid fuel shortage, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And again, reference is made to Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was in the international news. It was in the social media. We could find many examples that the Speaker ought to have known that this matter was a brewing scandal. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we do not submit that it was mere allegation, that it was speculation, that it was presumptive, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This was a matter that was gaining the attention in the international community with far-reaching implications. But, Mr. Speaker, this debate is not, the issue here is not whether the motion for urgent public importance should have been accepted or not. That is not the issue. I am not arguing for a moment that that motion should have been accepted or not. I am saying now that when this matter went to the Speaker, the Honorable Speaker ought to have looked at it, realized it was in the public domain, understood that it involved fuel trading. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is a matter of public record that the spouse of the Speaker in August 2019 was appointed chairman of Paria Trading. That is a matter of public record. We do not need the Gazette. We do not need documents to show that. And that is a fact that no one could dispute. So Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Speaker looking at it at that moment ought to have called the clerk and said, Madam Clerk, this is a matter on my desk. Please allow the Deputy Speaker to rule on this matter. Because there is a perceived conflict of interest, because it involved the spouse of Madam Speaker, which is a matter of fact. That is the first strike. When I arrived on the day, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was in awe. I was in shock. When I stood here and I read what was an approved statement to read, it was approved by Madam Speaker to read. and I read it. I was in shock that the Speaker allowed herself to sit in the chair to adjudicate and contemplate and consider this matter. I was in shock. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I came here expecting to see the person I'm seeing in the chair today. I did not. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was turned down, and today I carry no argument whether that decision of Madam Speaker was right or wrong. I carry no argument. My argument is that that was point one in which the Speaker ought to have recused herself. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is enough law, and my job here is not to quote all sort of cases, this one versus that one and so on. But just to let you know, in a famous case, the Pinochet case involving Lord Hoffman in England, where the matter of a judge in his own cause arose, Lord Hoffman in Pinochet 2, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a statement from Lord Brown Wilkinson that justice must not only be done, but it must seem to be done. And the slightest personal interest in it, either as a defendant or a prosecutor, led to a conclusion that Lord Hoffman in that matter should have recused himself. He participated in an appeal involving the former Chilean dictator, Augusto Pinochet, in which he was trying to evade extradition and so on, going to Spain. And the appeal in England was being heard. Lord Hoffman heard it, but did not disclose that his wife was indeed a member of a charity linked to Amnesty International that was an intervener or a party to that matter. And it was held first time in history, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in memory, that 7 law lords met and decided, 7 law lords, and we have their name, it's not necessary to call all their name, that they decided that Lord Hoffman was wrong, that he could not sit and adjudicate on a matter where his spouse was involved. It was said the slightest personal interest would arise, and an informed observer, Mr. Deputy Speaker, an informed observer, a fair-minded, informed observer can conclude that there was a real possibility that a decision-maker could have been biased. So, Madam Speaker, on that day, and Madam Speaker, to remind you, is an attorney at law, a former Attorney General, a tutor at the Hugh Wooden Law School, and Madam Speaker ought at that point to have said, I will have no part of this. The Deputy Speaker should deal with it. It was turned down. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the story continued. On the 28th, I caused to be written a letter to the United States Ambassador on the 28th, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in which I wrote about this matter, the importance of this matter, and the importance in the context of possible attracting international economic sanctions and so on. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the letter in my hand. Let me make the next point. This debate today has no issue with whether I was right or wrong to write the United States Ambassador. That's not the issue here today. Anyone, any member here can write anybody they want. If you want to write Modi in India, the General Secretary of the United Nations, you want to write the President, Secretary of any country, any body, a member, we exist with the constitutional right of freedom of expression. We can write anyone. And when I did this, I was condemned in some circles, and I accept it. I am thick-skinned. You could tell me almost anything you want, and if you say it outside, as the member for Diego Martin West will discover this afternoon, a letter is on his desk in which I am also taking legal action against him on a matter if you say something outside. So I don't fear if you say anything about me. I have recourse. I don't fear. You could say anything about me. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'll take on any one of them, any day, any time, any place. We not fear. But what I am saying is I and any member on this side, any citizen has the right to write anyone. When I came to the Parliament, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I come to the next issue now, and I'm following my own matter, the conflict. Whereas, yes, under the disguise of an announcement for the first time in our history, unparalleled in the Caribbean at least, we have done our research. Do you know it was the first time in the history of this Parliament since 1962, since Matthew Ramcharan and Arnold Tomasos and they occupied that chair, that a speaker use an agenda item called announcement to rebuke, to condemn a member of parliament. So the speaker made an announcement on that day, pointing out that I made statements and communicated with foreign emissaries and so on. At no time in that statement, which I have in my hand, Mr. Deputy Speaker, did the speaker indicate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, at no time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that there was a conflict and the speaker was conflicted. At no time, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That was a second strike. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I came here and I had to subject myself to hearing words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from the Honorable Speaker, hearing words in a statement under the guise of announcement that speaks about my ignoble objectives, that spoke to the member for Oropouche knowing better and being reckless and so on, but made reference to the member for Oropouche taking matters from the parliament outside to foreign emissaries. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there was a clear reference, I believe, to the letter. I just want to read for the record the part of the letter to the U.S. mission that dealt with this matter, and I quote, I built the case that it was a serious matter, and I did raise the matter urgent public importance. And this is what I said. Upon my so doing, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Bridget Anisette George, refused to grant her permission for the matter to be debated and aired in the Parliament. That is a fact. The Speaker indicated that this matter did not meet the high bar required for a motion of urgent public importance. That is a fact. Where did I bring the Speaker into disrepute? How? By saying that the Speaker refused the matter? No. By saying it didn't meet the high bar? No. And I ended by saying, this was most unfortunate in my respectful view. I said no more, I said no less. A decision by a politician to write anybody is a political decision. It is a political decision, and the Speaker ought not to engage herself in politics, hiding behind announcements to tarnish the reputation and image of any member of the opposition. She's there to defend my rights, not to undermine it. And when I heard that, I was in shock, in awe that a speaker could do this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And at that time, I want to remind you, I had no right of recourse. There was no due process to me. I could not respond to an announcement. I did respond in the press and indicated that it was out of order, which I indicate now. The Speaker had another option. If I misconducted myself in the public, I didn't in Parliament, if I did in the public, you could have issued a press release in the public. You could have made a statement in the public, but you would not have been protected with parliamentary privilege, and I could have taken legal action. But to say it in the House meant you were also using privilege to protect yourself in the event I decide to do what I did today against the member for Diego Martin West. So that was a second problem, that whereas those statements were never made in the Parliament, the Speaker chose the Parliament to make condemning and defamatory statements against a member of the opposition. And that we condemn today as well, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Pinochet case is clear. The matter on the 8th of May, using a statement like that to condemn a member, it is unheard of. This has happened before, and I will tell you very briefly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what happened. I don't want to waste time reading, but the member for Diego Martin Northeast knows about a situation in April 2008. There was a situation where 3 members of Parliament at that time, the member for Tabaquite, the member for Princestown, and the member for Oropouche, I seem to be always involved, made statements about a speaker. And I want to tell you the statements, as I read it again, they were worse. They were really not kind as I reflect. Made statements about a sitting speaker. When we came to the House, we were met with a motion of privilege by the member for Diego Martin Northeast, who then sat in the chair as leader of government business. The right approach is if any member goes out in the public and brings the Parliament into disrepute or odium, and brings the chair into disrepute and undermines the standing orders, a relevant motion of privilege is raised
generally by the leader of government business. Diego Martin Ortiz remembers that. The Speaker was referred to as being moronic, a tool of Patrick Manning. It was a bit unkind, but the member for Diego Martin Ortiz did that. Recent experience, when there was an issue with Emailgate. Anybody remember Emailgate? And it was proven that this thing was a hoax. This thing was a fallacy, a figment of their imagination. I moved a motion to censure.
Member, one second. Again, you are broadening the debate. Stick to the recitals, please.
Deputy Speaker, let me say that there is a process if the Speaker feels aggrieved. If the government felt aggrieved by anything I have done in the public domain, the government knows what to do. They can move a motion of privilege, as we have done over the years. I move on from that. So I had no due process. And, I want to make the point quickly. Why do you raise matters like these? A member talking to me in my office this week asked, would people get water tomorrow? Would the murder rate be curtailed tomorrow? Would people get housing? Would our citizens get salary relief grant? No. In fact, this is a censure motion. The Speaker is not even required to resign if it passes. In the highly unlikely event it passes, there's no repercussion in terms of the Speaker and her job. But you see, you cannot provide goods and services for citizens of a country if there's no respect for the rule of law, democratic principles, and constitutional values. You can't. Then everything falls down, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So that is why we raised this matter today. So the Speaker was a complainant, judge, jury, and executioner on May 8, 2020. That is the effect of that. This happened in Guyana in 2018. If those of you follow news, the Speaker across there, today Guyana is a basket case in the Caribbean with a most bizarre electoral development. The Speaker attacked a member of the opposition in the newspaper in Guyana, when you could have done that in...
Member, again, you are extending the debate. Stick to the recitals. This is the second time.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, coming back here. Please. Yes, Deputy Speaker. So the member for Orupuchi is condemned in a most uncivil manner, in a raw and obscene manner, when there was no provision in the agenda, the standing orders, or in the order paper for a Speaker making statements. Chose announcements to do that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the rules of conduct spells out clearly, we don't have to quote it, about certain circumstances in which you may be perceived as conflicted and you recuse yourself. Madam Speaker did not do that on one occasion, on two occasions, indeed on 3 occasions, could not do that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the office has been brought into disrepute by a failure to act properly and impartially. Once you have seen the Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited being cited, that matter of the fuel sale, alleged fuel sale, and Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is a raging issue, as I said. Documents are now in the public domain, not in private anymore. Documents are in the public domain showing that in this country we imported fuel from the same man we sold it to. We imported fuel from the same man we sold it to. Paria said they got money on the 15th of April when the facts show from the invoices that they received on the 26th of April. We have the invoices, the bills of lading. We have here all the documentation that Paria Fuel is involved in something suspicious, dark, clandestine. And it is a matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this matter has not ended. It was raging on the 27th of April as it is raging today. How can you explain a situation, Mr. Deputy Speaker? How can you explain a situation where, according to the bills, the invoices provided, we cannot account for 500,000 United States dollars, 50,000 barrels of gasoline cannot be accounted for when you look at invoices from point A to point B. We bought fuel from one man and sell it to the same man. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was a major issue. But again, I come back to the point that that is not the critical issue here. The critical issue is, should the Speaker on that day, April 27th, should the Speaker recuse herself or not? And we are very clear that a recusal was the only alternative available to her in those circumstances. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are another matter related to that in this fuel trade. Everyone, the national community is aware that Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, the allegation, yes?
Standing Order 48.1, please.
Yeah, again, member, you would have brought up, it's in the recital, and this is the third time, because I'm making notes, the third time you are referring to the same Paria fuel. You would have dealt with that recital already. So again, tie it in quickly and move on, because this is the third time you're going back to the Paria fuel.
Speaker, I'm following your line of argument. I would just go on to another related matter. The other related matter, Mr. Speaker, is that there are other occasions when, in this very matter, there were opportunities to recuse herself. Let me, as I come to an end, let me summarize now. One, when the motion came on the 27th. Two, in giving an announcement, as surreal as it was, there was no indication of a conflict of interest occurring, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Absolutely no. Even after that, there appears to be no apology. And today I call upon the Speaker to make a public apology for her conduct in this matter. And I call upon the House to condemn her. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in terms of the Speaker brought the office into disrepute, the Speaker is also guided by the Integrity in Public Life Act. The Integrity in Public Life Act at Section 24(1)(a) speak to all persons under this Act conducting themselves in a fair and impartial manner. I submit to you that the Speaker did not conduct herself in a fair and impartial manner and is also in violation of the Integrity in Public Life Act. So today I tell the Speaker, having told us for 5 years to take a walk, the Speaker should take a walk. Take a walk on this matter alone. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, in summarizing, the matter is alive in terms of the matters set out. There can be no conclusion to this matter unless the Speaker responds to this matter in some form or fashion. The matter involving the trade, the allegations of this trade, is ongoing. There are issues, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where today there is a huge hue and cry that in the Immigration Department, their computerized system has been taken off. So today, everyone coming in this country cannot be recorded. They are doing it manually and hiding.
Remember again, you are broadening the debate. Immigration, please move on.
Thank you very much.
We have 2 more minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are parallels in terms of the conduct of the Speaker. There are parallels, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where this has happened before. And I turn your attention not only to Guyana, as I did before, but also to Jamaica, where a sitting, and this is related to a motion of censure, same as is here. There are situations across the Caribbean where this has happened before, where in Jamaica, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the House tumbles into chaos as Speaker seeks to block censure motion against him, where the conduct of a Speaker is brought into focus by the Parliament itself. Mr. Deputy Speaker, how much time? 1 minute. In closing, I want to take it from the beginning, in closing, to indicate that this is not a personal matter. And let me indicate one time to those who are speaking opposite. This is not a motion of a substantive motion in the member for Oropouchis. So you know that this is not concerning my conduct or integrity. It is concerning the integrity of the person who sits on the chair. And you can say whatever you want, it doesn't matter. There are certain facts we have established. And there are facts we have established. The law is very clear on this matter. The Speaker acted improperly outside of her terms, outside of what is contemplated in May's parliamentary procedure, outside of the standing orders, in direct violation of established conventions, codes of conduct, both at the Parliament level and in the law as far as it relates to the Integrity in Public Life Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe that has come to the end, and I thank you, and I beg to move.
David, you go ahead. To second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Honorable members, the motion being seconded, I shall now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that this House censures the Speaker for failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office. I recognize the member for Digo Martin West, the Honorable Prime Minister. Sir, you have 30 minutes as the responder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is but a strange debate and a waste of Parliament's valuable time. The first thing we have to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, as I come here to make a few observations on this futile motion, is that the mover is very careful to identify himself with the motion and says very proudly that the motion is standing in his name. And he went on to justify our being here for this purpose by making the assertion that the Speaker failed to declare a conflict. And as a result of that, he is free to fulminate, to accuse, and to bring a motion to motivate. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, sorry. This is a stretch. It is a stretch. The member has a problem, we all know, and the problem is he's fighting for his political survival. As all politicians do, the member has to find a way to swim in swift currents, hoping not to be washed away. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, from where we sit on this side, all of us, we think it is disreputable and a waste of our valuable time that the member choose to file this futile motion to raise his profile wherever they screen themselves. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the conflict. Let's spend a moment examining this conflict. The member filed a motion, as was his right. The Speaker, as by her authority, is required to adjudicate on that motion and determine whether the motion is acceptable for business in this House. The member could be offended after, but at the time when the adjudication is made, it's made by the Speaker. The Speaker ruled that the content of the motion, for whatever the nature of the motion, that the motion did not qualify. And therefore, there was no business before the House. If the motion had qualified, then one could have stretched it and said, well, okay, the motion qualified, and there is a motion before the House. And in that motion, one can point to a conflict, if you are seen, and the conflict exists. But the motion didn't qualify. What the member is doing is saying that the reason why the motion didn't qualify is because the Speaker didn't want the motion to qualify. And the Speaker ruled that the motion didn't qualify because the Speaker had a family member who had, by punctinvination, had a connection to some content of the motion. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is the basis on why we are here. And the reason why the motion was brought today is because the member for Oropouche East, who is not a frequent associator with Veracity, is asking us to agree with him that there was or is a conflict. In fact, he says something continues. There is a conflict. And that Madam Speaker protected herself by this abuse of authority. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have to examine the facts to determine whether, in fact, there is this situation. Members of this House and their friends and their associates created a story in this country that a company owned by the people of Trinidad and Tobago violated American sanctions against Venezuela by our company selling fuel to Venezuela. That is the long and short of the allegation. It found its way into Reuters, got published in an American newspaper somewhere in the Midwest, and landed in the opposition in Trinidad and Tobago. And since then, they have been milking it like a cow. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it has been demonstrated beyond any repudiation that that allegation has no basis in fact. So, if that is so, and I'm not here ruling for the Speaker or determining or defending the Speaker's ruling was properly made. But the fact that he's alluding to, and which you had to caution him today on numerous occasions, not to drift off into Paria, that allegation which the UNC is the originator of, they who gave birth to that lie, Mr. Speaker, it has been shown that Paria has not done so. By irrefutable evidence put out in the public domain, whole-page ads in the newspapers, members of Parliament on the government side responsible for Paria, we have demonstrated to the world, not that we are afraid of anybody, but that the fact is that Paria did not trade with Venezuela on that transaction. Paria's fuel documents went to Aruba, and those were properly made, Mr. Speaker. And they could say what they want. Those are the facts. And with all the help up, down, and across, as we speak today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, nobody has been able to demonstrate an iota of evidence to show that what Paria has said in its defense is not true. So if it is not true, if the foundation of the lie is not true, how could the arboreal top of it be true? It reached quite by the Speaker now. Reached by the Speaker. No fuel was sold by Paria. But what you must debate is the Speaker's husband, as chairman of Paria, is supposed to be guilty of something. The Speaker must see and accept that from the member for Oropouche and recuse herself from the chair. That is the summary of why we are here today. So if there's no basis for it, if the motion has not been approved, what is the Speaker supposed to recuse herself from? And worse, as we stretch the argument, the Speaker is not supposed to be in the debate. So if you want to get up here and say anything in a debate that has to do with any member of the Speaker's family, we expect her to run off the chair before your sentence finished. That's what they're saying. And given their propensity for untruths and for nasty statements being made, I would expect, if we accept that argument, that in any debate, we can run the Speaker or you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, out of the chair by simply making an assertion devoid of facts and loaded with malice and nastiness. And of course,
Deputy Speaker,
let's examine the horns. Let's examine the horns.
48-4.
Overruled.
They all need to be seen today. They all need to be selected. This is the B team. Every one of them rejected and begging to come home back to their team. Every one of them.
48.
The only one who's guaranteed.
Members. Okay. Honorable Prime Minister, please, let's do not extend the debate again.
You put 43 candidates to fight 41.
Renegade. Yes. Hold on. Members, please. Carney East, can I proceed now? Right. So again, Honorable Prime Minister, let's move on.
I request that I get the time that all the time was lost, right? Good. The member makes a big case that one should recuse oneself when there's conflict. Could anybody in this chamber assist me? Because I don't think I'm seeing well. That is the same member from Orapuch East who was sitting on a committee where the Commissioner of Police came to give testimony before a committee of this House. And the substance of the testimony
Standing Order
had to
48-1.
Overruled.
Expect more of that.
Overruled, I said, member.
Expect
This is another
more of
standing
that.
order, sir.
Pardon?
48-6.
Six member, again, overruled.
Expect more of that, Mr. Speaker, because they all need to be seen and heard today. We were talking about conflict. This is the same member who just made that powerful case, according to him, about conflict. But he was sitting on a committee of this House, authorized by us, to receive testimony. The Commissioner of Police was called before that committee, and the Commissioner's testimony was about the conduct of the member who the Commissioner was telling the committee had association with certain people who were being monitored for their criminal conduct as he made common cause with them at the hotel in Port of Spain. Because that was the testimony, because that was the Commissioner's testimony, open to cross-examination.
Of his contribution.
We're talking about conflict here.
With the motion.
Please, member, hold on. I need to rule, sir. I need to rule. Again, member, you said it. Overruled.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And keep a track of my time, please, sir. The member was asked to remove himself because there was a conflict, because he was the subject of the testimony being given by the Commissioner of Police. The member flatly refused to comply. We had to convene in this House and by motion expel him from the committee.
48-1. This is not about Orapuch East. This motion is about the Speaker of the House.
Again, Honorable Prime Minister, tie in your point quickly. Tie in your point quickly and move on, please.
Mr. Speaker, is tied with a good chord. We're talking about acknowledgement of conflict by members of this House, including the Speaker. Conflict was the substance of his debate. This motion is about conflict on the part of the Speaker as alleged by him. And I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, that he either knows or he doesn't know about conflict, or he's just downright hypocritical. Because we in this House...
Mr. Speaker, 48-4. 48-4.
No, 1 second, Mr. Prime Minister. Hold on, Mr. Prime Minister. Orapuch East, what aspect exactly are you referring to in 48-4?
He's referring to a member of the House, Deputy Speaker, as hypocritical and all that. It is improper. It is offensive. It is offensive and insulting.
Hypocritical.
In language.
And I just want clarity so that I can rule. Hypocritical you're referring to?
Hypocritical and referring to a member on the opposite side as hypocritical. And so that is insulting and offensive. He's not addressing Gabriel Faria here.
Overruled.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I give you the assurance that all my comments, I'll try my level best to keep all my comments using only parliamentary language. And hypocritical, as I'm aware, is of the highest parliamentary label. But just to give you, Mr. Speaker, another aspect of the presentation, he was at pains to point out that this is not about the Speaker as a person. It's not about the Speaker as an individual. But if that is not so, then why is a husband the subject and the connection to your motion? The Speaker as a person, it is because she is a person that she has a husband. And it is the husband's chairmanship of Paria that brought you here today to say that Paria fuel was sold and the Speaker should have known by newsreels all about and to know to approve your motion. You can't have it both ways, either or. And of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he goes on to get the soundbite today that Paria trading, money can't be accounted for, and Paria bought from some person and sold to some person. Since the officers at Paria are not in this house to defend themselves, nor the board, let me, on behalf of the people who work at Paria, for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, tell this country that Paria Fuel Trading is a trading company and buy and sell at will fuel products depending on the needs of this country and Paria's trading business. So to buy from a market or a seller and to sell to that market or that seller, there's nothing wrong with that. That is how the fuel trading business goes. So what is said here today to get a soundbite, to implicate and to nasty the name of the company, is typical UNC nastiness. Totally uncalled for, totally unnecessary. And of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, why are our colleagues on the other side so hell-bent on trying to label our company, our officers, our people, our parliament as breaking sanctions? What is so much in it for you that you have to go so far?
48-1. It keeps repeating, Speaker, that we are asking for sanctions. We never did. And
okay, thank you. Overruled.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to make his point, and to further sully the Speaker's name, the experienced member of this House stands up today and tells the country that our Speaker violated the rules of this House, abused the standing orders, and used an agenda item to offend him in his personal capacity, saying that the Speaker chastised him and upbraided him under announcements, and this has never happened before. Anybody following parliamentary procedure and knows anything about parliamentary procedures, he would know, because he knows he was the leader of government business in this House. When other speakers would have done it, he would have seen in the history of this Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago where Speaker Sinanan, Speaker Emmanuel Carter, would have upbraided members in this House for dishonorable conduct. If he followed the British Parliament, he would have seen Speaker Burkow upgrading members of the Commons, including the current Prime Minister Boris Johnson, upbraided by the Speaker for their conduct. So to come here today and try to tell our country that our speaker did something so horrendously wrong to upbraid him. As a matter of fact, she was gentle on him because his conduct was so disreputable that she should have used another method on him, but she was gentle on him. But to come here and give the impression that the speaker spoke to and about him in violation of our standing order is yet another untruth being peddled by the member for Oropuchwas. Completely without facts and completely attempting to misrepresent in this House. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the unkindest cut of all is to have the Speaker, who has so well conducted herself in the 5-year period that she sat in this chair, to have her character being called into question by the member for Oropuch. That is the unkindest cut of all. He spoke about Sir Thomas Hungerford. I can speak about Vidkun Quisling, because a lot of what he had to say has all its origins in the UNC's attempt to speak untruths about Paria and Trinidad and Tobago by extension, and to please others so as to hurt Trinidad and Tobago. You know, you might ask, Mr. Speaker, who was Vidkun Quisling, who gave his surname to a word in the English language? The word Quisling, Mr. Speaker, became a byword for collaborator or even traitor in several languages, reflecting the contempt with which Quisling's conduct was regarded. Mr. Deputy Speaker, he spoke about Hungerford, I speak about Churchill. Churchill stated, you know, Mr. Speaker, Churchill was the first to use the name Quisling to mean collaborator in his public address following the Nazi invasion of Norway in 1940. In a speech on June 12, 1941, Churchill addressed the Allied delegates, and he used a new word to talk about a group of Quislings. And he talked about them who will carry the scorn of mankind down the centuries and is hired to fawn upon the conqueror, to collaborate in his designs and to enforce his rule upon their fellow countrymen while groveling to loathe themselves. We too have our Quislings. The world was at war, and countries across Europe were falling to the Nazis.
Deputy Speaker, stand in order.
Yet it was Norway's own Vidkun Quisling who drew the ugliest.
Overruled. Overruled.
He had betrayed his king and country in a pitiful attempt to gain favor. Mr. Speaker, we see this today as someone trying to gain favor.
48-4. There are no Quislings here, no enemy. The U.S.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, member. Just 1 second. Member, first of all, the rule is that your mask must be on. That's the first thing. Right? You gave your standing order, I will rule. No need to go into extra unless I ask for an explanation. Proceed.
Following a dismal growth for his party, the elections in 1930, Quisling began to look abroad for support. We see them, Mr. Speaker, looking abroad for support. And of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Quisling saw an opportunity. My colleague from Oropuch East today saw an opportunity to tarnish the Speaker's name in an attempt to promote his own.
Speaker, 48. Mr. Speaker.
Hold on a second.
Prime Minister has said the member for Oropuch see an opportunity
What standing order? What standing order,
tarnish
member?
this standing order 48-6
improper motive. To promote myself by tarnishing the Speaker. That is what he's saying.
Overruled,
are you accepting that?
Overruled.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And Quisling was desperate, according to Churchill. Today, we see a desperate member in a desperate bid to save and ignoble a career. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as he speaks of Hungerford and I speak of Churchill, Churchill said, however, in the eyes of the Allied nations across the world, Quisling was the ultimate traitor to his country, and his name entered and remained in infamy. I would not attach that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to any of my colleagues in this House. But I end by saying, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this motion falls flat, its motive is questionable, and I can say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the Honorable Speaker, who chaired these proceedings during this Parliament, has done an outstanding job for which the people of this country would be grateful. I can say, Mr. Speaker, that our Speaker in this House is an exemplar to whom every parent can point every girl child and say, I want you to be like Bridget Annie St. George. And any attempt by my colleagues on the other side, by one or by all, will be defeated and will be rejected by those of us on this side who are people who believe that there must be a level beneath which you will not sink in your desperation for a political entity in this country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member for Point of Pay.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This evening, it gives me no pleasure. I know.
Minutes.
What?
20 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm aware. This evening, I joined this debate as the Opposition Chief Whip and also a Member of Parliament for Point of Pay. Not only to support this motion by the member for Oropouche East, that I want to also say that I agree with this motion because over the last 5 years, we have been subjected to the Speaker on her failure to act properly and impartially in her exercise of her office. So if I read the recital, the last line on the motion, be it resolved that this House censures the Speaker for her failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office. Deputy Speaker, before I proceed with my debate, I want to respond to some of the issues of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister made a statement, this motion cannot be futile because it affects the execution of the democracy of the principles of Parliament. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is what we are here about saving the democracy of our Parliament and in this chamber that we have been subjected to an erosion of democracy by our Speaker for the last 5 years. And I want to quote Standing Order 1, Deputy Speaker. Standing Order 1 states, these standing orders contain rules for the conduct of the proceedings of this House and for the exercise of the powers possessed by the House. They are not intended to diminish or restrict the rights, privileges, and immunities of the House and its committees collectively or of its members individually, Deputy Speaker. Standing Order 1 gives us some hearing. The opposition members have been saying for the last 5 years, by this Speaker of the House, we have been, our voice, our concerns for our constituents have been eroded by time and time again by this Speaker. Deputy Speaker, this motion is timely and maybe long overdue and maybe a little bit easy on the Speaker because over the last 5 years, especially the last 3 years, I have been subjected.
This motion is not on 5 years, it's on a specific matter.
Again, I'll give you some leeway. Tying your point, member.
This motion, Deputy Speaker, is about the Speaker for her failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office. That is the recital. Deputy Speaker, I just want to remind this House what Oropich East State started off in his debate about Erskine May. The chief characteristic attaching to the office of the Speaker is in the House of Commons are authority and impartiality. We have not been getting that, Deputy Speaker.
Members, an announcement to everyone in the House. The procedure is that you must wear your mask. Please, proceed.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I want to turn to Standing Order 48.1. Standing Order 48.1 states in our standing orders, the debate upon any motion, bill, or amendment shall be relevant to such motion, bill, or amendment, and a member shall confine his observations to the subject under discussion. I think everyone here is well aware of 48.1, sometimes except the Speaker of this House, Deputy Speaker, because we as an opposition have been subjected
squarely and confidently on Standing Order 48.1. I have had reference to the standing orders and to May's. A motion of censure must be tied to the motion.
Thank you. Members, again, point up here. Tie in your point with regards to what you're trying to say. I'm giving you the
motion in the
opportunity.
recital, if I can kindly so remind this House, is that be it resolved, and I will repeat this every time, be it resolved that this House censures the Speaker for failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office, Deputy Speaker. That is the major part of this recital, of this motion.
I rise on Standing Order 48.1 because the motion is circumscribed by the entire motion as it must be read as a whole. And this is genuinely, Mr. Deputy Speaker, an abuse of the process.
Again. Again, Honorable Member, overruled, but I want you to tie in your point quickly, Mr. Honorable Member.
Speaker, I understand what the Attorney General is trying to do. Deputy Speaker, based on the motion that the Honorable Oropich posed here, it is all about impartiality or lack of impartiality and the biasness shown by the Speaker towards the opposition members. That is why we brought this motion.
Point of order, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I would draw your attention, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to the third and fourth recitals of the motion, which make it crystal clear that the motion is specific to what occurred on the 27th of April and on the 8th of May. That's it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. 48.
Okay, honorable members, again, from the start of the debate, I clearly identified that there are 6 recitals specifically in order to deal with. Member for point up here, right? I have said I'm giving you some leeway to tie in your point, right? Yes, standing orders have been raised with regard to objection, but I'm giving you the opportunity to tie in your point, but there are 6 recitals that I'm clearly going to be guided by.
Deputy Speaker, I understand what is happening here this afternoon, really and truly. And if you look at one of the recitals, whereas the Speaker brought the high and noble office of the Speaker in disrepute.
And again, I do not want to be going back and forth, all right? I would like to make a ruling, but amidst all of that, member for point up here, there are 6 clear recitals to be guided. All right, I understand the point you're making with regards to be it resolved in the last line, but I'm giving you the opportunity to tie in the point that you were trying to make over the 5-year period and come to the particular recital that we have to deal with. Again, I don't want to go back and forth. Make your decision and we'll proceed, please.
Deputy Speaker, but the Prime Minister had opened up the debate when he talked about the Speaker over the past 5 years. He talked about the Speaker's conduct over the past 5 years. The Prime Minister stated that in his debate, so I am trying to show.
Again and again, Honorable Member, I am still giving you the opportunity, just like I gave the Prime Minister with regard to the opening up of the debate. But I would like you to tie it in, just like I did with the other members.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So if the Prime Minister talked about the conduct of the Speaker of the House in the last 5 years, and I have to respond to the Prime Minister because I do not agree with what the Prime Minister has said. Because over the past...
All right, member, this is the last time. And I am saying to you, member, I am giving you the opportunity, but tying your point. I am giving you the opportunity. I am not buying you from the opportunity, member.
Deputy Speaker, while we talked about the Speaker has not been partial to our speakers here over the last few months, Deputy Speaker, it is about how the Speaker conducts herself to the opposition. And we are saying enough is enough. And we are saying that the abuse and interpretation of the standing orders by her on the opposition is a blatant abuse of the standing orders on the opposition.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 48-1. I must, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in light of what the member has just said, raise that standing order because the conduct that the member seeks to rely on for relevance in the recital that he's referring to comes after 4 separate recitals pinned to a date, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The honourable member has just confirmed that he's well outside that.
Right. And again, member, we have a clear guideline before us of the 6 recitals. Yes, criticizing of the Speaker within these 6 recitals. We cannot go beyond those particular periods. So if you're making a general statement about the 5 years, all well and good. But you have to be pinpoint on the 6 recitals that we are dealing with, honourable member. Right. So how are we going to go about it? Because I cannot be towing and throwing along this line. Time is going.
Okay. Deputy Speaker, again, let me just go to a standing order from my point of view. Right of reply. Standing Order 46, Deputy Speaker. I want to show the reasoning that the opposition is not being allowed a right of reply based on Standing Order 46 in this House. Even today, we're not being able to have a right of reply, even in our debate today. Standing Order 46 states, Deputy Speaker, the mover of a motion will reply after all the other members present have had an opportunity of addressing the House, and before the question is put, and after such reply, no other member may speak except as provided in paragraph 2 of this standing order.
I rise on Standing Order 48-1 because I can't raise sensibility. This honourable member is not the person to reply. He's not John.
I thank.
Again, member, last opportunity to tie the point. You cannot go outside of the parameters of the 6 recitals. You make reference and you tie in the point. I have not, up to now, I have not overruled. I am giving you the opportunity.
Let me go to Parliamentary fuel trading, if they want to go to Parliamentary fuel trading. On May 19, as the Prime Minister talked about Parliamentary fuel trading, there was a press release by Parliamentary Fuel and Trading Company Limited on March 28, 2020, and I want to read this press release into the Hansard Deputy Speaker. On May 28, 2020, ES Euroshipping, SA Euroshipping, a company registered and based in Geneva, Switzerland, approached Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, Paria, to purchase gasoline with an initial destination to St. Eustace, and which was subsequently changed to Aruba. Euroshipping was advised by management of the available products and the required due diligence process. In the furtherance of the due diligence process, the following information was provided to management. Because we're talking about parafuel trading inside it, and the Prime Minister referred to that, Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, and I go on. On or around April 14, 2020, Paria was advised by one of the independent contractors retained to provide services to the vessel while in Trinidad that the nomination to provide the said service was requested by the company with Venezuelan connections, Deputy Speaker. As a consequence of this information, Paria conducted Euro shipping and specifically advised that Paria cannot transact businesses with any Venezuelan companies and that its products cannot be shipped to Venezuela. Euro shipping advised on April 15, 2020 that the fuel was not destined to Venezuela. On April 15, 2020, payment was transferred to the Deutsche Bank to Paria's bank account at the Royal Bank of Canada. On April 21, 2020, loading was completed and the vessel left Trinidad and Tobago. I want to ask the directors of Paria Fuel Trading, are they going to...
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 48-1. This has absolutely no relevance to the matter put squarely and narrowly by Oropuchis.
Overruled.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, because the Prime Minister made a song and cry about Paria Fuel Trading, that is part of the motion. Whereas the matter sought to be raised concerning an alleged sale of fuel to Venezuela involving Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, allegedly in contravention of international sanctions. And I want to state here the opposition MPs and the opposition is not calling for sanctions on this country, Deputy Speaker. I want to make that clear because the Prime Minister is giving the impression that we are calling on sanctions on this country. We are not. We are calling on sanctions on high officials of this country who was involved in this deal, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, this motion is really about the Speaker's conduct in this motion and not excusing herself from adjudicating on the motion of the definite matter that the Oropuch East member brought in the House in April. Deputy Speaker, and it has been throughout the period of this 11th Parliament of sitting, we have seen the Speaker abuse the opposition members by flagrantly abusing his stand orders on us, Deputy Speaker. And we are saying...
Again, specifically to the recitals, please, not over the period of time.
Speaker, I'm not going over the period of time. Deputy Speaker, I have been subjected to the wrath of this Speaker.
Whether true or not, sir, Honorable Member, we are not dealing with that today. We are dealing specifically with the recitals identified. So retract that statement, please.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, when the Oropuchis member brought this motion here today as a private member's motion, it was to address the concerns that the opposition members have and the way we have been treated by the Speaker of this House.
Standing Order.
And we are saying,
I
Deputy
rise
Speaker,
on Standing Order 48-1. It could not be that we're here to decide how the Speaker has treated them.
Again, member, please, stick within the parameters. Stick within the parameters.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also rise on Standing Order 48-6, the wrath of the Speaker, imputing improper motives.
Overruled.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, again, we are seeing the abuse of standing orders by the government members on the opposition. Right? This has happened, and we are saying enough is enough. Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, Deputy Speaker, because I understand what is happening here this afternoon, they really don't want us to talk about the Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
Member, as the Speaker, I probably should take offense of that statement at this time, because I've given you ample opportunity in order to be part of this debate. So be specific when you're making the comments, please.
Apologize to you, because every time you have presided in that seat, you have been fair to the opposition members. And I think really and truly you should be the Speaker of this House, because you have exercised decorum, true impartial.
Again, let's stick to the particular recitals, please.
Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, as Opposition Chief Whip and Member of Parliament for Point-of-Peer, I want to say I support this motion brought by our member Oropuchi and call on this House to censure the Speaker for failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of our office over today and yesterday and in the future, Deputy Speaker. I thank you.
I recognize the member for Laventille West.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As we gathered today to discuss this censure motion against a very distinguished and learned and dignified Speaker who has served this House particularly well from the first day she sat in the chair. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the motion speaks specifically to the 27th of April and the 8th of May, and I would like to begin my short contribution by assuring this House that on neither of those days did the Speaker allow a member for Tobago to make spurious and damning allegations against any other member. On neither of those 2 days did the Speaker
48-1, standing order 48-1.
order the removal.
Member, hold on. I know you now started, right? I'm giving you a little preamble in order to see where you are going to, and so tighten quickly.
Speaking about those 2 days, and I'm saying the Speaker did none of those things. On neither of those 2 days, Mr. Deputy Speaker, did the Speaker make a statement that was untrue about the judiciary. On neither of those 2 days, Mr. Speaker, did the Speaker
standing order 48-1,
find herself...
Deputy Speaker, I don't understand.
Member, 1 second. Member, 1 second. Yes, let me hear you.
Deputy Speaker, I'm standing on 48-1. I don't understand what it is the member is speaking about. We are dealing with the censure of the current Speaker of the House. I don't understand.
Right, again, likewise, member, and this is why I mentioned to him, tighten and let's get to the relevance. Right, so I'm giving you a couple seconds again. Yeah.
Member for Kumuto Manzanilla understands little.
Okay, members.
48.
I would like you to retract that statement, please. I would like you to retract the statement.
The member said she didn't understand. I retract it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, both the member for Oropuch East, the mover of this motion, and my friend from Point-of-Peer spoke at length about standards and conduct. The member for Oropuch East is well recorded as shouting in this parliament. Why don't you hush your stink mouth?
Again, honorable member, I would like you to retract the statement and move on to the relevance of
I retract that.
It do not fit in this.
The member, as has been stated in an earlier contribution in this debate, had to be removed from a joint select committee on national security because of standards and conduct.
Overruled.
That member tried to face down a privileges committee of this House and dissatisfied with the findings of that privileges committee, took this parliament to the court and was kicked out of the court, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In other words, his action failed.
With respect, hold on. Two persons on their leg. Who do I recognize?
Speaker, 48-1, the member for Oropuchi is not the subject of this substantive motion. This is a substantive.
Again, honorable member, again, the member may have brought the motion, but the content and the subject is relevant to the 6 recitals, right? So let's get to those 6 recitals and any other thing that may have probably been brought up in the debate.
I was just talking about standards and conduct. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it happened that on the 8th of May, 2020, the Speaker made an announcement in this Parliament in relation to a definite matter of urgent public importance, and in so doing was forced to, quite properly, rebuke and chastise the member for Oropuch East for what the Speaker considered to be dishonorable and disrespectful conduct in challenging her ruling outside of this House. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Speaker could have gone further, because members are all aware that to challenge the Speaker's character can be seen as a punishable breach of privilege of this House. So he was spared. This motion, I tell you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is part of the throwing of his normal tantrum because he did not get his way. And the Speaker stood solidly in defense of the standing orders of this House.
48-6. Deputy Speaker, the member is implying...
Member for Laventille.
The member, I'm standing on 48-6, the member is implying that because a motion was denied that he is throwing a tantrum, this is furthest from the truth. We are dealing with a matter of where the Speaker did not recuse herself.
Thank you. Overruled.
All over the world, Mr. Deputy Speaker, speakers have been known to chastise members whose conduct interfered with the dignity of the House. And speakers have the right, Mr. Deputy Speaker, under our standing orders, to have exclusive cognizance over the proceedings of this House, of all houses of Parliament and assemblies. So the basis of the motion before this House started off quite fragile, Mr. Deputy Speaker. He was solidly and rightly chastised by the Speaker of this House, and that is what displeased the member for Oropuch East. Nothing else, and that is what this debate is all about. What are the facts of the matter? The member attempted to raise a matter of definite, urgent, and public importance on the 27th of April of this year under Standing Order 17. The Speaker, as we all know, plays no role in deciding about the validity, the rightness, or the wrongness of the motion at that point. All the Speaker does is to determine whether the motion qualifies or doesn't qualify. And on that occasion, in fact, that Speaker had to deal with 88 such motions since he has been sitting in that chair in this term. And most of them have been rejected. I have been a member of this House since 1995 with a little hiatus. And I have seen and I have filed motions under Standing Order 17 or similar. Most
get... Not over your...
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Speaker determined that the matter did not qualify. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this had to do with a question of pariah fuel trading, as we know. And I want to record for this House that the Speaker permitted 12 questions to be answered, and all were answered by the government in relation to that matter.
Deputy
12.
Speaker, I am standing
so
on
to suggest
48-1. What is the relevance of questions being answered in the House has to do with this particular motion here that we are dealing with concerning the Speaker recusing herself, and that is what I'm asking, 48-1.
Overruled.
And I'll still answer the member for Komuto. Yes, indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The conduct that is being questioned on the part of the Speaker is that she did not allow the members an opportunity to express themselves in relation to that matter. 12 questions she permitted, and they were all answered. They were all answered. So that is not correct. The Speaker returned to the Parliament on the 8th of May and pointed out all of the elements in accordance with May's and our standing orders of such a motion and demonstrated comprehensively, Mr. Deputy Speaker, why the motion did not qualify. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when members file such motions in all of the parliaments of the past, including some I filed, and they do not succeed, you either file it under another standing order or you go home, you get a few moments in the sun, and you go home. Not the member for Oropuchis. What he did was to embark upon a campaign on social media, print media, and morning shows, crying tears and misrepresenting the facts and complaining that the Speaker had denied him an opportunity to be heard. Most distastefully, I might add. And as the member for Diego Martin West pointed out, at that stage when the Speaker rejected the motion on the Standing Order 17, there was no motion because it was not debated. It did not exist. It was rejected. So to claim beyond that bias is really a non-starter. It's a trick. It's a ruse to fool those who are unwary and those outside of this Parliament who don't understand.
I'm standing on Order 48.6. The member cannot determine what were the thoughts on our side, and therefore it is wrong for him to stand and impute improper motives.
Overruled. Thank you very much. And what was worse, not only did the member campaign on the Speaker's good name on social media and in the print media and on the talk radio,
I stand on 48.6. I will not make. Speaker?
You can have your seat. You can have your seat. You can have your seat. Of order, a standing order, member?
I am standing on standing order 48.4. The member was offensive to my colleague from Komoto Manzanil. You should withdraw that.
I would like you to retract and just apologize on that statement. And apologize, please.
I apologize. The member can stand as often as she wishes.
No.
I withdraw that, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
You. Lovely.
The member for Oropuch East went further than his escapades against this Speaker in public. He wrote a letter to the Ambassador of the United States. A letter in which he, and I have a copy of it before us, a letter, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in which he said, and I quote, "It is for that reason that the first available opportunity on May 27, 2020, on behalf of the parliamentary opposition, I sought to raise this issue for debate as a matter of urgent public importance, pursuant to our Parliament standing orders, so that the government could be called upon to respond and account to the population by way of denial, affirmation, explanation, or excuse as it saw fit. I believed that raising the matter in this manner was in keeping with the spirit and intent of the democratic tradition of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago." This is a letter to the U.S. ambassador, which is why the member for Diego Martin West was reminded of Quisling. Properly so. His letter continued in the last 3 paragraphs. These are the last 2. It continued. "Upon my doing so, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Bridget Anizet George, refused to grant her permission for the matter to be debated and aired in the Parliament. The Speaker indicated that this matter did not meet the high bar required for a motion of urgent public importance. This was most unfortunate in my respectful view." The member continued in that letter. In the circumstances, he's telling the U.S. ambassador, I considered it appropriate that I should present you, Mr. Ambassador, with a copy of the proceedings from the Parliament as recorded in Hansard, the official public record for May the 27th, 2020, for your record and contemplation as you see fit. Quisling, this is a member of our House who went to court against this Parliament, now writing the U.S. ambassador, complaining about the proceedings in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. They can't avoid that. That is the reality. But when your moral compass, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is skewed, you don't know right from wrong, up from down, you lose it altogether. Twisted. And coming to tell us today about standards and conduct, which is why I take offense in the protection of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and more specifically, the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when things like that happen, he was roasted, rounded upon by the public. I heard them, I read them, I saw them. They condemned the member for Oropouche East. Trade unions, a former speaker of this House. He got a sound public chastisement and disciplining. And he also tried to explain what happened. Yes, Mr. Deputy.
Oropouche, just for the records now, let's expunge that statement now.
Oh.
Yeah, let's expunge it.
Thank you.
No, I didn't say, I said expunge it from the records.
Oh, I thought you meant me.
Right.
That member is well known to us. Indiscipline is well known to us. I told you his behavior in that regard before. On the point of bias or conflict of interest, I would like for this Parliament to take note of the fact that we have a public administration and appropriation committee of the House, which looks after those matters in relation to ministries and entities of the state. And when HDC, which the same...
Deputy Speaker, 48-1.
Which the same...
48-1.
HDC has nothing to do with this motion.
2 seconds.
The chairman of Parliamentary Fuel, or Parliamentary Trading Company, is the same person who chaired the HDC. And when the HDC came before the committee of which I just spoke, the speaker who chairs it recused herself. Why did I say that, Mr. Deputy Speaker? To demonstrate that the speaker was at all times acutely aware of the concept of conflict of interest. And on that day when the speaker had to rule on the question about the motion, the standing order, understanding order 17, it, like everything else, would have loomed in her mind, but she found, as indeed we on this side do, absolutely no conflict of interest to be impugned or complained about. None. And the member for Oropouche East cited some cases, and I could cite a dozen of them. I have about 4 of them on my desk as I speak, dealing with the wider concept of conflict of interest in the law generally. But when it comes to parliamentary affairs, we are guided by Mays, we are guided by McGee of New Zealand, we are guided by Odgers of Canada, and we have speakers' understanding of what is a conflict of interest. And let me give you an example of conflict of interest, if you permit me. We had a joint select committee of this Parliament on national security, and the member was a member of that committee. And the police commissioner came and told us, and others, that the member was discovered to be involved with criminals in this country.
On 48-1.
1 second.
48-1, Deputy Speaker.
Relevance? Overruled.
Dealing with conflict of interest. That's all right. I have
Deputy Speaker. 55(1) repetition. Tedious.
Now, hold on 1 second. And again, okay, hold on, member. Again, anyhow, I'll just deal with the member for point of view. Chief Whip, tedious repetition. It would have been mentioned just once, so for now, overruled.
Thank you very much. I was interpreting this business of conflict of interest, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And of course, the member wouldn't understand it then, refused to recuse himself from that committee. We had to come back to this larger house and move a motion to have the member thrown off that committee on national security because he did not understand that he became the subject of the inquiry while he was an inquirer. But he talks about the Speaker today as judge, jury, and executioner. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this motion filed by the member is shameless. Or let me put it this way, it is as shameless as it is shameful. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, it ought properly to be rejected by every single member of this House. And I would like to close where I began by saying, in my own estimation as the Member of Parliament for Laventille West, with experience in this Parliament and in the Senate since 1995, the Speaker of this House has always conducted herself with great aplomb and dignity and professionalism. And on those bases, the member for Oropuchis is, in my view, quite out of step, quite out of timing to challenge the impeccable record of that Speaker when his own record doesn't stand close. Mr. Speaker, this motion must be rejected, as indeed I reject the conduct and the behavior of the member for Oropuchis for all time, including the presentation of this futile motion before us here today. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
I recognize the member for Naparima.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
You have 20 minutes, member.
20 minutes. Thank you, sir. Let me start by saying that I support the motion brought by my colleague, the member for Oropuch East, and eloquently supported by the member for Pointe-à-Pierre. It is timely, it is relevant, and it is long overdue. And I take the last part of the recitals, be it resolved that this House censures the Speaker for her failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office. Mr. Deputy Speaker, perhaps it is important for me to educate the Prime Minister on what essentially is the concept of conflict of interest. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I refer to the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, the Integrity in Public Life Act, Chapter 22, Number 1, updated on the 31st of December 2016. Clause 29 deals with conflict of interest, and it states, for the purposes of this act, a conflict of interest is deemed to arise if a person in public life or any person exercising a public function were to make or participate in, let me read that again, make or participate in a decision in the execution of his office, and at the same time ought to know that in making the decision, there is an opportunity either directly or indirectly to further his interests or that of a member of his family or any other person. So, Deputy Speaker, very clear. At the point at which that was presented to the Speaker ought to know or reasonably should have known that there was a conflict of interest. So whether, if the Speaker said that the motion did not qualify, the mere act of participating in that decision was an exercise in conflict of interest. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have heard terms. I listened to the Prime Minister, and he made terms, and I wish to tell him he used the word collaborator. And the only collaborator in this parliament is him who collaborates with Maduro, somebody who has been on an international watch list. None of us on this side, any collaboration. And I want to make the point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if the word that the Prime Minister uses equates with treason, and treason you have to consort with the enemy. And I want to ask the question today, is the United States an enemy of Trinidad and Tobago? Let us know. Because you can't have your cake and eat it. Your children cannot live in the United States and you call them the enemy. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, 48-1, please.
Again, member, stick within the recitals, right? You would have made your statements, but again, stick within the recitals, please. Yes.
And the last point on that, you cannot go for medical treatment in the United States.
Standing order 48-4, please.
Definitely that
one. Specifically to enemies. Yes. Could you use a different word, please?
Right, okay. If you consort with people who do not, countries which do not have the interests of your countries, in treason, it is countries where your country is at war with. We are, as far as I know, we are not at war with the United States. But I'm... Standing order. Why was this motion moved? Why was this motion moved? The member for Oropouche East sought leave to discuss the matter of use of institutional or infrastructural capacity in the energy sector to facilitate a gasoline trade with Venezuela. The Speaker of the House adjudicated. Now, we have arguments as to whether or not she should have recused herself, but so be it. She adjudicated on the matter and was not satisfied that it qualified under Standing Order 17. The Speaker further stated that the apparent misuse and abuse of Standing Order 17, and it was clear, and I quote here, that there was difficulty in grasping the meaning of the term definite. And she said, for a matter to be definite, it must be specific, but the facts must be settled, and it must be certain, not hypothetical or presumptive. And the question we ask on ourselves on this side, was the Speaker's adjudication on that standing order representative of a total objective view of the MP for Oropouche East request? Because you said it must not be hypothetical, it must be factual. So what are the settled facts in the motion that was brought, in the standing order that was brought by Oropouche East? Fact one, the sale of fuel by Parliamentary Fuel Trading with a Swiss-based company with known ties to U.S.-sanctioned Venezuelan President Maduro. This was a fact. It was definite, and I take my source from Newsday, May 8, 2020. Another fact, it was made to a questionable organization. The shipment, that's a fact. The third fact, the shipment of fuel was assigned to Aruba. They cannot deny that. They cannot deny that the Aruban authorities indicated that the shipment never reached that country. Guardian, 19th May 2020. There was concern that the shipment might have ended up in Venezuela. Another fact. If correct, then the sale of that fuel exposed a major state-owned entity and persons involved in that company and or persons in Trinidad and Tobago and or all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, expose them to sanctions. And I want to correct a statement. If sanctions are placed on anybody in Trinidad and Tobago, it's not us, it is them who acted in a way that brought our country, exposed our country to the possibility of sanctions. I'm making the point that when the Speaker said that it did not qualify under Standing Order 17, the matter was definite. The matter brought by Oropouche East was urgent, and it was of national importance. So why was it turned down? And can we not form the opinion that it was turned down for other reasons other than the fact that it was definite, and I'm using the definition of the Speaker. It was reported in Loop Tuesday, Loop June the 11th, 2020, that a United States official said that it is critical that businesses in Trinidad, and I quote, track and comply with U.S. sanctions imposed on Venezuela to the fullest extent possible. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, following the denial of the motion, the Speaker gave a long speech on what she labeled a continuous misuse and abuse of Standing Order 17, and that deals with definite matters of urgent public importance. And the Speaker listed Standing Order 16, matters on the adjournment of the House, and a private member's motion under Standing Order 33.3 as alternative routes. However, these alternative routes raise matters of concern to us. Firstly, Standing Order 16, the total time for the debate is 40 minutes, with each member getting 10 minutes to present. So here my colleague is presenting a matter that could impact on the economic development of Trinidad and Tobago and our potential exposure to sanctions. And we are told with a straight face to go to Standing Order 16, which in my view is sending us down a rabbit hole. So this possibly cannot be sufficient time to effectively discuss urgent matters. The second private member's motion are heard once a month on Private Members' Day, and these motions can only be placed on the order paper 12 days before. And still, the Speaker is the sole judge of whether a motion is approved for debate under Standing Order 40. So whereas adjournment under Standing Order 17, definite matter of urgent importance, a member may rise in place and seek leave to debate, and secondly, needs only 90 minutes notice before the sitting of the House. The Speaker's ruling thus far on Standing Order 17 leaves little room for anything at all to be discussed. We have been flabbergasted. We have brought COVID. We have brought crime. We have brought the sanctions. And over.
48-1. Again, remember, I'll give you the opportunity, as you now started it, to tie it in, please. Crime, COVID, and so on. Let's tie it in to the 6 recitals.
Thank you. And I was speaking to, okay. The Speaker may be very well fortified, but she may have a conflict of interest in the shutting down of the Oropouche East NP. And I now go to the principle of conflict of interest. I read before about how it is interpreted by the laws. An individual, if is conflicted, he or she has to immediately recuse him or herself from any consideration whatsoever of the matter beforehand. The UK Parliament, the House of Commons Staff Handbook on honesty and avoidance of conflict of interest, it forbids employees, workers, and persons who are involved in the House of Commons from being involved in a situation where the conflict of interest can arise. And in upholding the Code of Conduct, they have established a Commission of Parliamentary Standards. It is so important in the British Parliament, from which we draw sustenance. They have a Commission of Parliamentary Standards, where every action is analyzed not on the legality, but on the ethics, whether it is right or wrong by governing principles. And the House may impose sanctions on any officer of the House when it is considered necessary. But we go to Robert's Rules of Order, Parliamentary Procedure, Robert's Rules. And he says, recusal normally occurs when a director has a conflict of interest or prejudice concerning a matter. Could anyone tell me if my spouse is involved in an organization, it comes to Parliament, my duty is to declare interest? That was not done. Erskine May's Treatise on Law, Privileges, Proceedings, and Usage of Parliament, 25th edition, 2019. It states, and I quote, where a member of the committee, particularly the chair, has a financial interest which is directly affected by a particular inquiry, or considers that a personal interest may reflect upon the work of the committee or its subsequent report, they should stand aside from the committee's proceedings relating to it. This is May's, this is the Bible of parliamentary procedure, saying once you have an interest, and if you are married to and you have a joint account, and let's for whatever reason say the United States freezes that account, your account is frozen. And therefore you are conflicted. And Mays is telling us, you ought to recognize that and stand aside. So it is well-established procedure among parliaments throughout the world. The United Nations Convention Against Corruption, this is seen as corruption in the global arena. It obliges the UN Convention Against Corruption, Article 8.5, obliges parties to establish measures and systems for public officials to make declarations to appropriate authorities regarding any benefit or conflict of interest with respect to their functions as public officials. We cannot go with a straight face to any organization in the world and tell them what occurred in Trinidad and Tobago on April the 27th was not a conflict of interest. We cannot go to the UN and say it was not corruption. Could give examples in New Mexico. The speaker was recused himself from taking part in the consideration of a bill that would prohibit the sale of medical marijuana because he was involved in respect of, as a lawyer, represented a firm that was making arguments or lobbying in favor of the sale of medical marijuana. So he recused himself. In Trinidad and Tobago, if we are to believe the Attorney General and the Minister of National Security, they allegedly, and I choose my words carefully, they allegedly saw it fit to recuse themselves during deliberations of cabinet in which they had a personal interest. Now, we will find out when we get into power, get into office, whether the cabinet note reflects that. And I say this, I hope they don't do what is necessary to hide that bit of information. I want to tell the Prime Minister something. He made a statement that all of us on this side is the B team and we singing for our suppers. I do not need Parliament to talk and articulate the views of my constituents. He is a geologist. He has studied the ages of rock. I draw sustenance from the rock of ages. Cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee. I do not need a Parliament. I do not need a Parliament. None of us on this side need a Parliament because we in our professional capacity can serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago with dignity and honor. And I thank my leader for giving me 5 years. If I don't get 5 more years, so what? So what, ladies and gentlemen? I want to make the point. That we on this side, it was my colleague attempted to make the point that we on this side feel hard done by the Speaker of this House. You could tell me I shouldn't say so, but this is how I feel. I want to quote something. I had Rodney Charles sitting in this House, and since this could be the last, I crave your indulgence. The Madam Speaker said, and I quote, and I'm going to give you this warning. This is Rodney Charles, Naparima. There's a particular penchant to bring a particular incident which has reached a particular place.
Relevance to this particular debate.
Let me give you the recital, if you so wish, sir. And I'm not even going to the last. It is, I'm not going to be it resolved. I'm saying, and whereas the Speaker brought the high and noble office of the Speaker into disrepute. And I'm saying...
Particular matter, member.
For the recital, you told me, tied to the recital, the Speaker committed a breach of established rules of conduct and conventions. Conventions mean practices. It doesn't mean action in front of us. When we talk about what are the conventions of parliamentary procedure by Mays, we're talking about a series of activities that constitute a behavioral pattern. And I am just seeking that. And it's three recitals I've quoted. I was told, I am not going to allow freedom of speech. I was told that in this parliament. My constitutional right, freedom of speech, was abridged. And as far as I know, and I did A-levels British Constitution, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And any law or standing order that is ultra-virus, the Constitution is ultra-virus and inconsequential to the extent that it goes against the Constitution. I have freedom of speech, but here it's worse. And member, I quote the Speaker, watch your demeanor, please. Member for Naparima, watch your demeanor. Watch your demeanor, please.
I rise on standing order 48-1. None of that event did not occur on the 27th nor on the 8th of May.
And again, it's the same point I was trying to make, member. So, okay. Proceed.
I want to make the point that this is a personal view. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, and I want to do this for posterity, should be a creature of the House and not a beneficiary of political patronage from the executive Trinidad and Tobago. And in that regard, he or she should be elected by a 3/5 majority of the House, and failing that, the President should appoint, subject to the concurrence of the Leader of the Opposition or the Prime Minister. In that way, we'll have a Speaker as a creature of the House who will act always to preserve the integrity of the House and impartiality and independence of the legislative branch of the government, which is a co-equal branch of government. With that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I support the motion. I feel we are hard done by the Speaker. We feel she should have recused herself, and it was improper, notwithstanding any arguments made, improper for her to remain and adjudicate on the matter brought by the member for Oropouche East. I thank you.
I recognize, 1 second, members. I recognize the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we've come here today to debate at Private Members' Day an ill-founded, unprepared motion by the member for Oropouche East. And I join with the member for Diego Martin West in his observations that the member for Oropouche East is politically irrelevant, desperate, and has people begging for him. He has people begging for him, left, right, and center. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we have...
48-6. I mean, why they can't spend time on the motion and me? I mean, what is it with me?
Again, member, I'll give him a couple seconds just to tie in where he's going.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is quite ironic that in his moving of the motion, the member for Oropouche East, after putting this motion forward, which is a frontal attack on the Speaker, as 90% of his contribution went on to say, he was doing the moonwalk and saying, this is not about individuals, this is not about me, this is not... And he went on to proclaim to the world at large, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have thick skin, I can handle anything, tell me anything. The whole population has looked on here today and seen is the exact opposite. Right? In 5 years of sitting here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we have heard from that member for Oropouche East is consistently, in my view, abuse of parliamentary privilege. Consistently. This motion here today is founded in an allegation and accusations of conflict of interest, and we will deal with that frontally. But it has to be put on the Hansard that the member for Oropouche East style is one that must be condemned. The worst type of example for a parliamentarian, for any parliamentarian. The member for Uropuch East contributions are consistently putrid, immature, and quite frankly despicable.
This Speaker, 48-4. What is this?
Okay.
This is my life?
Remember, I would like you to move on with regards to the thing. I think you would have...
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The thick skin seems to be quite thin today.
Proceed.
But you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this motion that the member has moved here today, this motion that the member for Uropuch East has decided to take today and to bring here as a response to a dressing down that he got for behavior that was a dark day in this house, right? The member for Uropuch East attacks members all the time, and today
Deputy
he has
Speaker,
used
I
this
stand
motion
on
to attack the
48-6.
Speaker.
Deputy Speaker, I stand on 48-6. This is not about a member of Parliament of Uropuch East. This is not about that, and therefore it is incorrect and improper for the member of the Honourable Minister not get in his way, that he is behaving in this manner, and this is absolutely incorrect. This is on the matter of...
Okay, thank you, member. Overruled, but again...
Mr. Deputy Speaker, we heard the member for Uropuch East talk about integrity. He used that word frontally in his contribution, talking and challenging the integrity of the Speaker. It is our submission that the member for Uropuch East has no locus to talk about integrity, as he lacks integrity.
No. 48-4 and 6.
I'd like you to retract that statement. Say it otherwise, please.
Retract. I'm not retracted. I retract the statement that the member for Uropuch East has no integrity. Retracted.
Hold on. Retract the statement. You don't need to say anything else, member. Thanks.
Retracted, Mr. Deputy Speaker. What we've also seen here today is the typical UNC backtrack and moonwalk. The UNC, through the member of Uropuch East, and the absent for, this must be about the third or fourth sitting of the member for Siparia, led a frontal attack on the population of Trinidad and Tobago. And the population of Trinidad and Tobago has already judged them. The member for Uropuch East is the one who started this malicious rumor about Paria trading and is trying to continue it, and then called for U.S. sanctions on Trinidad and Tobago. And no amount...
Deputy Speaker, there's 48, I stand on 48-6. The member apparently cannot...
Okay, I got you. Overruled.
You see, no amount of backtracking can rescue the UNC because they're on record and the population came out and
Deputy
said
Speaker,
that their calls for U.S.
I stand
sanctions
on 48-4.
Overruled.
And no matter how much the UNC tries to rewrite history, the population of Trinidad and Tobago is clear that the UNC called for sanctions on Trinidad and Tobago.
History is history. We cannot rewrite history, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is what it is.
Overruled.
48-4. The minister should withdraw his remark to my colleague from Komoto Manzanilla.
One second.
I heard it.
All right, 1 second. Hold on, 1 second. Hello, member, please. I'm on my legs, please. Honorable member, you'll probably have to be specific. I'm not clear.
Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if we are not hearing in this chamber this evening, then this is an abuse of what is taking place. And
okay. No, I asked you to be specific. That's all I asked.
I heard, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I heard the Minister of National Security tell my colleague from Komoto Manzanilla that she cannot write her name, and I want that to an apology from the Minister of National Security.
Honourable Member, was this statement made? Please apologize.
That is withdrawn, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So as I was saying, and it seems to have gotten all of them, or most of them on the other side, hot under the collar, the facts are that the UNC, no other than the member for Urupuch East and the leader of the opposition, the member for Siparia, at the outset of this whole farce, at the outset of this whole, what they wanted to call an allegation, but all a trumped-up plan by the UNC about Paria fuel traders, selling fuel to Venezuela, of which there is absolutely no evidence. The documents don't support it. Nothing supports it. From the outset, the UNC called for sanctions on the people of Trinidad and Tobago and for Trinidad and Tobago. No matter how they try to backtrack, no matter how the member for
48-6, we did not call for sanctions. Please correct him.
Overruled.
So the UNC who continue to call for sanctions on Trinidad and Tobago, the member for Naparima, like a little jack in the box jumping up every 5 seconds.
Mr.
Overruled.
4, the Minister of National Security continues to use insulting language to my colleagues in this House. How can the Minister of National Security refer to my colleague
Member. Member. Okay, member.
Yeah, Deputy Speaker.
Member, have your seat, please. Proceed.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to get back to the motion that is before...
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I stood up on Standing Order 48-4, and I would like a ruling on that, please.
Overruled.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, back to the motion. This motion, brought by the member for Urupuch East, who now has a history for 5 years, on every single occasion he's contributed in this House, he sought to mislead the population, and the member is the epitome of being a stranger to the truth.
Deputy Speaker, I stand on Order 48-6 and 48-4. It is imputing improper motives against the member of Urupuch East. It is the right of every member in this House to...
Thank you. Okay. Right. Member, let's be specific. No 5-year period we're talking about with regards to that particular recitals.
So with respect to this motion is another attempt to mislead the population. To mislead the population, in particular with respect to a speaker who has served this country impeccably and as a great exemplar to the women of this country as to what leadership as a speaker should be like. The member for Urupuch East spoke about conflict of interest. He spoke about integrity, and I want to deal precisely with that here this afternoon, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is an individual who comes here to talk about integrity, but is in police reports having left Parliament to go to the Hyatt to pay for drinks for known criminals.
Standing Order 48-1 and 48-4. He brings unproven information.
Again, Honourable Member, that has been dealt with 3 times. I'd like you to move on to your point.
Not those particular allegations, but guided, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It has also been put in black and white and reported that this member has questionable links with known criminals. And he wants to bring a motion here on conflict today.
48.
What is happening here?
Who do I recognize? Go ahead. 48-6.
48-6, Mr. Deputy Speaker. What is happening in this House here this evening?
Again, remember, again, the motion is not directly with regards to the conduct, with regards to the honorable member. So let's get to the actual recitals and synchronize. Yeah.
But Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member for Couva South just made a comment that should also be retracted, and then the member for Urupuch East, in his typical style bowling, he has gone crazy. The member for Couva South made a comment to the effect of he is out of control or something like that. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like those dealt with before I proceed, please.
I withdraw it.
Please.
Speaker, I made
I'm not
no
recognizing
such...
you yet. I am not recognizing you yet, sir. I am not recognizing you. Urupuch East, I am not recognizing you yet, sir. I am not recognizing you as yet. Right. Again, honorable members, once what statements are made reach the ear of the chair, I will so act accordingly. Rest assured. If it do not reach my ear, right, and you all want to be specific on the matter, I am not in a position to go down that road. Right? Once it is that this scenario, we are actually dealt with. So once the quorum is maintained, I will be able to act accordingly on each particular situation. Right.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this ill-conceived motion ends with the request for a resolution. Be it resolved that this House censures the Speaker for failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of our office. I want to deal with that phrase of acting properly and impartially in the exercise of office. Once again, the author of this particular motion is a defendant before the courts. He's a defendant before the courts for acting improperly, allegations of corruption made against him whilst he was a government minister.
Deputy Speaker, this motion is not about Urupuch East.
Tying your point quickly, member.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, once again, the point being made is that asking for the censure of the Speaker for her failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office, I was referring to the phrase to act properly and impartially in the exercise of office and drawing a specific reference to Urupuch East, the author of this motion, and reminding the population that he is a defendant in an EMBD matter with allegations of corruption as a government minister.
I stand up on 48.6. This has nothing to do with the debate. I don't know if we should speak about Christiana Sanka. It does not have anything to do with the member for opposition.
Fair enough. Okay. Overruled.
Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is always interesting when the truth is told with respect to the opposition, how they react. And I just put on the record that the member for Komuto Manzanilla is falling into that trap of others on the other side, of always trying to bring people's family and make-believe family
Deputy
into the
Speaker,
debate.
I stand on 48.6. I feel like an abused woman here. Yesterday, we passed a bill in this House about emotional and psychological abuse.
Okay. Thank you. Overruled. Proceed.
Absolutely no mention of,
Please,
yeah,
members,
and that's how they are.
Members, please. Members.
And on improper motive of 48.
Members. Members, please. Right? Hold on, hold on, hold on. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, those on this side who have done all that they can, and the population has judged us for the protection of Trinidad and Tobago, stand here unanimously in support of the Speaker of the House and have only good things to say, and say that she has acted with propriety and upheld that chair that you sit in. And this motion is doomed to fail. And the author himself is one who has many questions to answer. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member for Caroni East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I consider it very important for me to join in discussions in today's sitting of the House on Friday, June 26th, on this private member's business. And on this motion brought by the member for Urupuch East, which I fully support in its entirety. All the limbs of the motion are true and correct, and the resolution at the end is very damning to the integrity of the Speaker. The limbs of this motion, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the first is that the members sought leave on April 27, 2020 to move the adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing a matter of urgent public importance. And that has been dealt with by many of my colleagues. The second is the alleged sale of fuel to Venezuela involving Parliamentary Fuel Trading Company Limited, allegedly in contravention of international sanctions. We want to re-emphasize that the United National Congress did not call for any sanctions whatsoever as far as this is concerned. The facts are out in the open. The facts have shown that the government has been unable to conclude and to say clearly where that shipment of fuel went to, knowing fully well that it went to Venezuela. And Mr. Ruperti will be coming, probably speaking shortly on that matter to explain, and much more will come on that. The third limb is Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, is the Speaker in ruling that the matter did not qualify under Standing Order 17, failed to declare a possible conflict of interest. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the Speaker had an opportunity when that motion of urgent public importance was brought to her. She could have told the clerk of the House, look, I am conflicted here, and therefore I cannot go and discuss or debate on or whether to let this motion go through or not. The second, she could have come here and said, well, look, I'm conflicted in this manner, and therefore I recuse myself. And the third opportunity is when she made the statement of what you called announcement. That's a third opportunity the Honorable Speaker would have had to recuse herself and say that she was conflicted, her interest was conflicted. But on these three occasions, she failed to do that, and therefore she stands guilty of an egregious egregious decision, and what could be construed as misconduct. The fourth limb of this motion is, in the aftermath of this ruling, the Speaker, under announcement, rebuked and condemned a member of the House, in the House, for reporting elsewhere. I'll come back to that. But the fifth and sixth limbs are particularly important. The fifth, it is the member's opinion that the Speaker committed a breach of the established rules of conduct and conventions of this House. And the sixth is that the Speaker brought the high and noble office into disrepute. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I have a voluminous document illustrating and showing very clearly on a number of occasions where we thought, and in the minds of the ordinary man, as the lawyers will say, member for St. Augustine and others, it is the ordinary man who has to give the appearance of bias or no bias. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to refer to a number of times when we, in this House, and the ordinary man would have thought that there was bias and some degree of prejudice from the Honorable Speaker. On the parliamentary sitting on Monday, 13 February 2017, it was a discussion on FATCA.
Member,
yeah?
Again, I think we have set that template already. It's not 13th of February, 15th of March, as the case may be. We're dealing specifically with these timelines as guided here on the definite motion. Not those arrangements.
Illustrate, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
No, but see, I don't want, but I don't want you to identify no series of dates, Honorable Member.
Dates, all right.
We're dealing specifically.
The Honorable Speaker did not allow Standing Order 44-8 to be raised by the MP Rudal Monilal. Hansard, page 87.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 48-1. The member is quoting an event from a date outside of the terms of the motion before us.
We are not dealing with a period outside of the purview that we are dealing with here today. So the idea of quoting those dates with regards to what transpired with questions, with answers and so on, I am not allowing you to go down that road.
I ask your thinking on this. The fifth limb of this motion, it is the member's opinion that the Speaker committed a breach of the established rules of conduct and conventions of this House. And the sixth limb is the Speaker brought the high and noble office into disrepute. And I'm giving examples of these to show our point. I will just guide the chair on the times when these we thought were examples of breaching of these fifth and sixth limbs of the motion. We must justify why we say that fifth and sixth limb, and I'm justifying it for you. How many times we have been put out of the House?
We justified in relation to the period that we are dealing with here in April of 2020. Right? I am not allowing, we said that from the beginning of the debate, and I'm not going to allow it to happen at this time.
Deputy Speaker, that the time period you want me to...
No, I am not stating that, but it's clearly identified in the motion that we are dealing with here.
Speaker, the motion has a limb on it. It is the member's opinion that the Speaker committed a breach of the established rules of conduct and conventions of the House. And the resolution which says that the House censures the Speaker for her failure to act properly and impartially in the exercise of her office. And I am bringing these examples as showing that the Speaker has...
Fair enough. Fair enough. And to be specific, and this will be the last occasion, whereas pursuant to Standing Order 17, the member for Oropuch East, the member, sought leave on April 27, 2020 to move the adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent importance. All right? And that's specifically the area and the gist of this particular debate today, not outside of those purviews. Right?
Me to show where the Speaker...
To show. I need to be clear. I just need to be clear on what we are dealing with, sir. Member.
I wanted to ensure that the listening public and the viewing public knew what were the issues that confronted us as an opposition on a regular basis over the last 4.5 to nearly 5 years, which caused us to bring this motion in addition to what the member for Oropuch East has put in. Because we were denied on too many occasions the ability to say what we wanted to say in this Parliament. And this, Mr. Speaker, is not, I don't want anyone to think that this is a motion focused on the personality of the Speaker. It is the office that the Speaker holds. And emotions of no confidence and censorship are well noted in Commonwealth countries and even in non-Commonwealth countries. And examples like the BBC on Tuesday, 19th May 29, Michael Martin said he was the Speaker. I will relinquish the office of Speaker on Sunday, 21st June 2009. And he said he apologized for his role in the events, but gave no indication of what he would have, indication about when he would stand down, only to be challenged by a succession of MPs who asked for a debate on a motion of no confidence in him. So when the member for Oropuch East brought this motion, It is at the end of a frustrating 4.5 to 5 years, when so many of us have been put out of this house, including myself, on numerous occasions, when we lost total confidence in the conduct of the Speaker.
Member for Caroni East, to remind you again, the motion moved by Oropuch East is specifically on a particular aspect that we are dealing with, not 4.5 years, not 5 years, Honourable Member. It's specific.
I move now to the...
That I'm bringing it to your attention, Member.
And that indicates that, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Just reminding you that it's 3 times, right? So proceed.
I want to differ from you on your interpretation of this motion, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I'm sorry to say that. You have been a person of integrity, and you are a person of integrity, but I differ from you on this.
Again,
but I will...
Member, again, don't bring me into the debate at this time also, Member.
Mr. Speaker, I will deal with the limb which speaks about the announcement. When the Speaker came here, we thought it was a pamphlet that she was reading from, but it was an announcement. And from the ordinary man's interpretation of that announcement, it was an expression of the dictatorship from the highest office in the land. We considered it to be inflammatory and
order, if you would please me, Standing Order 48.6, dictatorship.
Yeah, could you rephrase that, please? Retract and rephrase.
Well, it was an expression of high authoritarianism by the office of the Speaker. We considered it inflammatory, autocratic.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Standing Order 48.6 again, please.
Hold on 1 second, Member.
I respectfully raise again Standing Order 48.6. Thank you.
Overruled.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, on that announcement, there was an unwarranted attack of our elected member, which was most tragic. The Speaker issued a pamphlet as an announcement to distract from her compromised position. It can be considered as intemperate language which she used. The Speaker cannot use the provision of announcement to make political statements. And we on this side denounced the arbitrary and repressive tirade of this Honourable Speaker at that time. We saw totalitarianism, explosion, and absence of balance and objectivity. The Speaker said we must not use allegations in terms of when she wanted to define what was matter of urgent and definite and public importance. So when the member for Oropuch East raised the matter of the gas deal, when United States were putting sanctions across countries around the world who were dealing with Venezuela, that matter was not urgent, it was not definite, it was definitely. And when I raised even a matter that I considered sometime in the past too on the COVID business, the Speaker said it was not. But the Speaker was trying to get at the member for Oropuch East and myself by saying that the matters that we bring on a regular basis of definite matters of urgent public importance are not definite, are not urgent, and are not of public importance. But we beg to differ from her on that. And this is why the member for Oropuch East found disfavor with her statement when she said, when she refused to allow that debate to go on. We considered that matter was urgent, reflecting a crisis, a crisis in the relationship between the United States, Trinidad and Tobago, and the other 40 countries with the United States on the Venezuelan issue. Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Erskine May in a parliamentary authority, or it is, written by British constitutional theorist and clerk of the House, Thomas Erskine May, originally published in 1844, a 496-page book with the rules and practice, a treatise upon the law, privileges, proceedings, and usage in Parliament. The primary role of the Speaker is to preside over proceedings in the chamber, including committees of the whole. And freedom of speech is a privilege, and we have been deprived on numerous occasions of our ability to speak because we have been interfered with we are repetitious, there's tedious repetition, you're irrelevant, and on a regular basis, the time speaking for us had been shortened, curtailed, and we were put out of the House when we differed from the rulings of the Speaker. The ordinary man on the street, when they look at Parliament, 350,000 people voted for us. They say, what is happening in Parliament? Why are you all being abused in Parliament? And their thinking is that the abuse has come from the highest position in Parliament, the pinnacle of what is supposed to be a democratic society and a Parliament with values, and the values must be upheld. But we thought that the values were compromised at the highest level. And this is what every speaker here this evening feels very hurt and pained of the way that we were treated over the last 4.5 years. With members put out on a regular basis, embarrassing.
Member, again, 4.5 years. We are not referring to that specific period.
I hear you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what I'm referring to, these were issues that led to this substantive motion coming here today. It is a culmination of suppression of the voices of the opposition. It's a culmination of what has been handing down to us, make us feel belittled as people who represent 350,000 people in this House. And that cannot be accepted, and that must not be accepted, Mr. Speaker. No matter where we are, the rest of the world, you have 53 Commonwealth countries, and you could scarcely see any of the Commonwealth countries doing that. Australia had 18 times where they voted a motion of no confidence or censorship on speakers and deputy speakers starting from 1944 to 2010. And these motions of censorship, Mr. Speaker, raise the issue of no confidence in the Speaker in the discharge of his or her duties. He has acted in a partisan way by displaying bias against members of Her Majesty's opposition. We are the opposition under the British Commonwealth system, the Westminster system, and we are the alternate government, and we should have been given the opportunity to be heard. How many members on the other side had been put out by the Speaker? How many members were stopped from speaking at particular times?
Honourable Member, that is not what we are discussing today. Right, you have 2 more minutes, Member.
In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I agree with the motion, the last limb of the motion. The Speaker must be censured. During and throughout her tenure, the Speaker has not and did not make the effort necessary, needed to show impartiality or independence of the office. There was authoritarianism that came to the forefront, which we did not envisage as an opposition, because we voted for the Speaker. We didn't contest against the Speaker's nomination. We supported the Speaker because we knew that the role of a Speaker must be neutral, independent. And when the role of the Speaker was established under the Westminster system, I want to say that the Speaker has demeaned her office and lost the respect of the majority of the Trinidad and Tobago citizens. And as we speak about censuring, we are expressing severe disapproval in a formal method this evening, Mr. Speaker. So we say that the Speaker stands to be censured by virtue of this motion. Thank you very much.
I recognize the member for Diego Martin, Northeast.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker. Just as an aside, the last speaker referred to his side as Her Majesty's loyal opposition. I'm not surprised, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because that honourable member has a habit of writing to the Queen when he has an issue with this Parliament and other places. So I understand the colonial mindset of my good friend, the honourable member. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if one looks at the motion before the House, the motion starts off with a reference to an attempt to seek leave on the part of the member for Oropouche East on the 27th of April 2020 to move an adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance. The motion then goes on to speak about an alleged sale of fuel, allegedly in contravention of international sanctions. Then it complains about the Speaker making a ruling that the matter did not qualify under Standing Order 17. The motion goes on to make a further complaint that sometime later, this event occurred on April 27th, sometime later on the 8th of May, approximately 2 weeks later, the Speaker, the Honourable Speaker, rebuked the member for reporting elsewhere on the matter. And then everything else, Mr. Deputy Speaker, flows from that, because these are the alleged offenses complained of. And therefore, members on the other side have tried to stretch the boundaries of the matter before the House, but they have not succeeded in so doing, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This matter is all about what occurred on the 27th of April when the Honourable Speaker declined to agree that a matter raised by the member for Oropouche East qualified as a definite matter of urgent public importance. And then, as a secondary complaint, the member for Oropouche East complains about the Honourable Speaker rebuking him. Now, in his presentation, the member for Oropouche East referred to a case, the Pinochet case, well-known case when people are studying the whole concept of bias, and referred to the conduct of a particular judge who was dealing with that case, Lord Hoffman, whose wife had been an intervener in a matter relating to the former president of South American country, Argentina, I believe, or Chile, Mr. Pinochet. And the member for Oropouche East used that to attempt to prove his point that the Speaker had an interest in this matter, and therefore the Honourable Speaker should have recused herself. But there's more to it than that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. If I go to the fourth recital, which the members opposite are avoiding, and those few who tried to deal with the fourth recital have misled this House, misled the public, and therefore it comes to me to educate the public and those members opposite who are desirous of education or capable of, exactly what occurred on the 8th of May. On the 8th of May, the member for Oropouche East was rebuked by the Speaker for reporting elsewhere on the fact that his attempt to have the alleged sale of fuel debated as a matter of urgent public importance. So let's see exactly where these reports elsewhere that occur in this
motion. And I refer you, Mr. Speaker, to the AZP News, dated May the 1st, 2020, and it's a report on a letter written by the member for Oropouche East to the U.S. ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. And in that letter, the member for Oropouche East complains that he tried to raise a matter in this parliament, but was refused permission by the speaker. And then he goes on to introduce into his letter that this matter could lead to the imposition of economic sanctions on the country of Trinidad and Tobago. So this Anansi story, this fantasy, these fabricated tales from members on the other side, that they never introduced the concept of economic sanctions on the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, are just nonsense, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was the member for Oropouche East in writing to the ambassador, and this is what disturbs me. Why would a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament write the representative of a foreign power, has nothing to do with this Parliament or the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago as it is, and introduce the concept of economic sanctions against the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago? It is little wonder, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that there's not just a perception in the public. We're talking about perception of bias and so on. It is not just a perception in the public. It is a belief in the public that the member for Oropouche East is guilty of treason. Not my belief, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's a belief in the public.
Mr. Deputy
So
Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Remember, 1 second.
Standing Order 48, Deputy Speaker, Standing Order 48. 6, clearly imputing improper motive. He's suggesting that the member has committed treason. So please.
Thank you. Yeah. Honorable Member, treason. I would like you to expunge it from your thing, please.
Certainly, that is simply a belief in the public, not mine. But let me move on now to the substantive matter. And you know, when people go and do a law degree by some strange means and don't attend the requisite classes and then are somehow called to the bar and then don't practice, that is how they fall into error, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is how they fall into error. Because let us look at what May's parliamentary procedure has to say. And before I go on to that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, how much more time do I have?
Basically 3 minutes. We break for tea, and then you'll have an additional 10 minutes when we return.
Do we have to break for tea, Mr. Deputy Speaker?
3 minutes, and we break, sir.
Right.
Honorable Member.
I better get in what I need to say in that 3 minutes then. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if one looks at...
Standing Order 4410.
Overruled.
Speaker, let me look at what Mays has to say about the discretion of the Speaker, having heard an application for an emergency debate. The Speaker has wide discretion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and must consider a number of matters. The Speaker must consider whether the matter is national in scope, or whether it is of regional interest. It does not qualify if it is. Or whether it is related to a specific group or industry. It does not qualify if it is. The Speaker has to determine whether it is definite, whether it is urgent, and whether it is of public importance. These are all the considerations that the Speaker has to apply when determining whether a matter should qualify. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what is far more relevant and defeats this whole notion of bias is that, and I'm reading now from rulings of the New Zealand Speaker, rulings of the Speaker, 2017 edition. What is of far more importance, and I'm reading from page 189 of that document, every statement in a letter seeking to debate a matter of urgent public importance
must be authenticated in the same way as statements in a notice of motion. If applications for an urgent debate are not accompanied by authenticating material, they will be declined on that ground. So on the very motion, the member for Oral Peace fell into error because he referred to the alleged sale of fuel and the alleged breach of sanctions, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Therefore, he did not authenticate his material, and therefore the matter failed even before the Speaker could bring into any considerations of discretion with respect to specificity and how definite it was and so on, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Member, at this time, the sitting is suspended for tea. We return at 5 p.m., where you will have your 10 minutes addition.